Okay, let's make a start. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the December Planning Committee. I hope everyone's in the festive spirit this afternoon and setting a very good example. Where's your career? Oh, it's behind you, but that's another story altogether. Anne's got her festive jumper on, which is good, so we'll... Go on then, go.
If you indulge me, because it is Christmas. Last year, my first planning committee Christmas, and it was like, everybody wore Christmas jumpers, because it was the last one before Christmas, but nobody remembered to tell me. And then I turn up this year, and it's just me, and Sarah's a bit sparkly. So, cheers, guys.
So what you're saying is our plan worked then, obviously, which is absolutely fantastic. We'll delve straight into the agenda. Apologies for absence today.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Bridgman, Councillor Ney is substituting, and we've received apologies from Councillor Matt Smith.
Hey, Carol, welcome back after your absence for a while. It's good to see you. And Josh McCarthy is on his way. I think he's had personal issues which delayed him slightly, but he should be with us before too long. Are there any declarations of interest anybody would like to make at this stage? No, if not, as ever, if anything crops up during the meeting, catch my eye and we can add it in there. Item 3 are the minutes, and I'd like to propose an amendment under item 43, the declarations of interest. My personal interest was in item 6.1. Not 6.2. As far as I know, I don't have any relatives in North Hill unless anybody is going to tell me to the contrary. So if we can just amend that, and if there's no other issues to raise, I'll sign those. If you could pass those over, Angela, I'd be extremely grateful. Item number 4 is Chair's urgent business, and I do have an announcement I'd like to make, and it's, well, if you'll forgive me, I'm going to read it out. It's to do with the changes announced by the government earlier this week, so if you can indulge me. On 16th of December, the government published for consultation a major update of its national planning policy framework as part of its wider suite of reforms to the planning system. The new NPPF is a full rewrite that goes much further in its revisions than last December's changes and splits the document into distinct sections for plan making and development management decision making. As a draft statement of national planning policy, it is a material consideration in the determination of planning applications before us today, but as it is a draft document for consultation, it has at this stage limited weight, but nevertheless, we must take it into account. The existing NPPF policies clearly prevail until it's replaced by this new draft. The new National Planning Policy Framework is a landmark change to the approach to planning delivery to make the approach simpler, faster, and more rules-based. This is a direct response to the housing crisis the country faces and the national commitment to growth and renewal. The new NPPF will make it easier and faster to develop local plans and for local authorities to set a strategic vision for housing and growth. The new NPPF contains a raft of changes which will directly impact on the decisions we make in this committee going forward. As members should know, the Planning Committee is at the forefront of delivering the strategic objectives and individual policies of the Plymouth and South West Devon Joint Local Plan adopted in March 2019. As reported to the Natural Infrastructure and Growth Overview and Scrutiny Committee on 3rd of December, the preparation of the next Plymouth local plan will commence in earnest in the next year, in the new year, setting the policies and proposals that will guide development in the city until 2050. This committee has a crucial role in helping to prepare that new local plan. The 12 most significant reforms to draw to the attention of members of the Planning Committee are as follows. a permanent presumption in favour of suitably located development within urban areas, establishing in principle support for developing land around rail stations within existing settlements and around well-connected train stations outside settlements, driving urban and suburban decentrification, supporting higher density development in sustainable locations with good access to services, securing a diverse mix of homes with stronger support for accessible housing to meet the needs of older and disabled people, and providing more flexibility on the unit mix of housing for market sale, making it easier to bring forward small sites, streamlining local standards to promote certainty for applicants, encouraging economic growth by giving substantial weight to the benefits of supporting business growth, and in particular in relation to key sectors, including those named in the industrial strategy, AI growth zones, logistics, town centres, and agricultural and rural development. We can anticipate new policies and proposals in relation to Plymouth's designation as the National Centre for Marine Autonomy, the potential for a new town in the city centre, and the need to develop a substantial number of new homes across the city. Ensuring that adequate provision is made for minerals extraction, recognising their economic importance. Embedding a vision-led approach to transport, moving away from a predict and provide approach to transport planning that can create unattractive environments dominated by cars. Taking a proactive approach to both mitigation and adaptation in relation to climate change. Conserving and enhancing the natural environment to recognise landscape character and conserve and enhance existing natural features. And taking a more positive approach to the use of heritage assets. I also understand that the Planning and Infrastructure Bill currently before Parliament will receive royal assent this week. This has significant implications for the future operation of the planning system and for this committee. I will be discussing how we can bring members of this committee up to date with these various changes with the Service Director for Strategic Planning and Infrastructure in the new year. That concludes the statement. Thank you very much for your patience. I want to reiterate the final bit in particular about making sure we have as much access to information and training going forward. That's absolutely essential. We don't normally have debate on this agenda item, but I think the nature of what I've read out is significant just to merit one or two comments, and I see Patrick hesitating and hovering there.
Apologies. Sorry, so I was getting tired, Chair. Yeah, apologies. Thanks for the statement. Just two things. If we could just circulate the statement, that would be really useful. And I would certainly urge some sort of training in January. Not so much training, but just updating us and to be able to, for members to be able to have an opportunity to ask some questions. Kate, that would be really useful, please. Yeah, thank you.
The answer to both of those is yes. Josh, welcome along. Good to see you.
Apologies, I was late, Chair.
No, that's okay. I have asked everybody, as you know, but do you have any declarations of interest at this stage?
No, I don't.
No, that's.
I'll reiterate Patrick's comments as well.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much indeed. Number 5 is questions from the public. I don't think we have any as far as I know.
No questions.
No, okay. Which takes us on to item number 6, the planning applications, and the first is 6.1. We're at page 5 and 87 North Hill. And Ethan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This application has been referred to Planning Committee by Councillor Steve Ricketts. Firstly, I will refer to the term House of Multiple Occupancy as a HMO throughout the presentation. The application site is 87 North Hill, a mid-terrace property in the Drake Ward, currently operating as a HMO under Use Class C4. This use is supported by a lawful development certificate issued on July 8th of this year. The property is located in one of the city's most sustainable areas, within a short walk of the city centre, Mutley Plain, the Plymouth train station and Central Park. The proposed development is a change of use of the property from a 6-bed HMO under use class C4 to a 9-bed large HMO, falling under the sui generis use class. The sui generis use class means a class of its own with no flexibility to change to another use without full planning permission. The proposal involves no external alterations, and planning permission is required due to the change of use only. We had no objections from our consultees, which were Residential Waste, Community Connections, Public Protection Service, Low Carbon Team, Lead Local Flood Authority, Natural England, and the Highways Authority. On screen now is a photo of the front of the property and the rear of the property from the rear service lane. I have outlined the relevant property in red, which fronts the busy North Hill. The adjoining neighbouring properties consist of a HMO and apartments above office space. The next slide shows a bird's eye view of the property from 2025 Google satellite imagery. I have outlined the outdoor amenity space serving the property in blue and the whole property boundary in red. With no external alterations proposed, this site layout will remain unchanged along with the parking situation. The property lies within a resident parking permit scheme. However, confirmation from the Highways Authority confirmed that the property is fully exempt currently from being issued parking permits, and this will be maintained for the following the increase of the capacity. The local Highways Authority were consulted on the application and had no objections, subject to a condition providing bicycle storage, which has been added to my officer recommendation. On screen now is the existing floor plan of the property. It is served with 6 bedrooms across 3 floors with 2 shower rooms and separate kitchen and dining space. On screen now is the proposed floor plan of the property. The property will now be served with 9 bedrooms, all with ensuite bathrooms and a communal kitchen, diner / living space. All of the bedrooms will meet the space standards. Initially, Community Connections objected to the proposal due to the loss in amenity space. After amended plans were received, which reconfigured the amenity space and increased the size of the kitchen diner, they changed their view to neutral and stated that they would likely grant a certificate for 9 bedrooms at this property, given the size of the communal area shown on the proposed plans. The final slide shows a side-by-side view of the site plan, again with the blue lines surrounding the outdoor amenity space. The proposed site plan shows a dedicated refuse area and bike storage, which has been added to the recommendation as conditions. With no consultee or public objections to the proposal, we do not view the harm created from the proposal to be sufficient for refusal. The impact on occupant amenity is the main concern of the proposal. However, the provision of generous room sizes with en-suites and the sustainability of the location, close to high-quality outdoor amenity space, form our opinion that the proposal is on balance acceptable. We also recognise the ambitious housing targets for the city and see the increase in 3 bedrooms as beneficial. In summary, the proposal was on balance considered acceptable in terms of visual impact, occupant and neighbour amenity, highways impacts and waste, and as such we are recommending conditional approval. Thank you, Chair.
Ethan, thank you very much. We had one registered speaker, which is Councillor Ricketts, who I understand isn't here, sent his apologies. So we'll pass on that one, which then leaves it open to the committee for questions and comments. Don't all put your hands up at once, it's a little bit disconcerting. Paul, help us out.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm totally in favour of this. I don't really know why it's been brought in front of us. No one seems to be objecting very much. So I'm very happy, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Oh, Josh, yep.
Yeah, I just echo those comments. Confused why it's here. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, so the recommendation on page 5 is to grant conditionally, and like our speakers, I can see no issue here, so I'll be in a mind to support what we've got. So if we could go to the vote, I'd be grateful. I will declare that carried unanimously by everybody who is present. So thank you very much. Thanks, Ethan. And we will... Was that you? No. You sure? Oh, dear. She's started already. Okay, so we will now go then on to item 6.2, which is at page 15. And we're at 28 Woodland Terrace Lane. And Emily, in your own time, please.
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to make members aware of the addendum report for this application. Since the publication of the officer's reports, the Council's Natural Infrastructure team have visited the site to measure the stem diameter of identified on-site vegetation. They concluded that there are currently 2 trees on the site, and it has been noted that a further tree has previously been located on the site but was removed prior to the site visit. Members should also be advised that the removed tree was shown on the proposed landscaping plan as being retained, and so officers have removed this plan from the approved plans with landscaping details to be secured via condition. The site is proposed to be cleared of vegetation and trees as part of the redevelopment works. Based on the diameter at breast height, the Natural Infrastructure team concluded that the 2 trees presently on site and the removed tree, taking a precautionary approach based on previous photographs, considered that the proposal would result in the loss of a total of 3 trees, and given their size, in accordance with Table 28 of the SPD, would require mitigation planting of 4 trees. In light of this, the Landscape Ecological Management Plan condition has been amended to require this planting on site. As a result of this condition, officers consider the scheme to accord with Dev 28, providing sufficient on-site tree mitigation. As such, paragraph 88 of the officer's report has been amended to remove reference to non-compliance with Dev 28. Officers maintain the concerns with the biodiversity net gain baseline as outlined in the officer's report, and I will touch upon this later in the presentation. The officer's recommendation remains to grant conditionally following the information that has been received. So this application is being heard by the Planning Committee due to member referral by Councillor Ricketts. This item relates to 28 Woodland Terrace Lane, a vacant site most recently used as a language school, which falls under Class F1. The site is located within the Drake ward of the city and is accessible down 2 lanes, Woodland Terrace Lane to the west and Thomas Lane to the east. So this is the submitted site location plan. And then these images have been taken from Google Street View. These show the existing building and car parking when viewed from Woodland Terrace Lane. And then this is the street view from Thomas Lane. And then here we have a 3D view. So this is taken sort of from the south of the site facing towards the north. And then here are some existing street elevations which were submitted as part of this application. This application proposes the demolition of the language school and the construction of 6 semi-detached dwellings and associated works. This is the proposed site plan, which shows the proposed layout of the site. The south of the site will contain car parking spaces and the access road through the site. Each property will be served by garden space, which is located in the northern extent of the site. If I can just be clear, the tree that's labelled to be retained on this site plan is the one I referred to earlier, which has already been removed. A proposed long elevation has been submitted to understand the view of the dwellings from the lane that is proposed to be created. Various concerns have been raised in public comments, primarily due to the density and scale of the proposed development, various highways concerns, neighbouring amenity, the loss of the existing use, problems regarding refuse collections, visual impact, and the environmental impacts. These are the proposed dwelling elevations, which show a pair of the semi-detached houses. The dwellings would have a modern design. The surrounding area is characterised by a mixture of housing styles with both older and more modern properties located alongside each other. It is also noted that most residential properties in the surrounding area comprise of 2 or 3 stories. For this reason, officers in consultation with the urban design team have not raised any in-principle concerns with the proposed design or massing. Officers have recommended that full details of the material palettes are secured via condition. Here are the proposed floor plans showing, again, a pair of semi-detached houses. Each house is proposed to include 3 double bedrooms and an office room, alongside an open plan living, kitchen, diner on the ground floor, as well as bathrooms and en-suites. All bedrooms and habitable rooms will be served by windows and will have access to light. Whilst separation distances to provide sufficient outlook, as has been outlined in the SPD, are not met for some of the front elevation windows of the dwellings, officers consider that this is a similar relationship to other properties locally given the dense nature of the surrounding development. The dwellings meet the nationally described space standards, and officers have included a condition that only the bedrooms as noted on the plans can be used as such. All dwellings served by outdoor amenity space, and any gardens which fall below the SPD standards are considered to be adequately mitigated by the proximity of the site to Freedom Fields, which is at less than 5 minutes walk away. Public comments have also outlined concerns that the proposal would result in the loss of employment space and a community facility. Officers understand that the language school served residents throughout the city and not just in the locality, and in February was relocated to an alternative premises in the city. Marketing information has been submitted setting out that the only interest in the site had been for residential or student redevelopment. This has been reviewed by the economic development team, who have not raised any concerns, and so it's considered that the evidence suggests that there is no reasonable prospect of the existing use continuing. Officers have also assessed the impact on neighbouring amenity, considering the public comments received. The following section has been submitted outlining that the proposal would not result in an unacceptable loss of daylight for the closest properties to the north and east of the site, which have habitable room windows facing the proposed development. Furthermore, officers are satisfied that the proposal meets and exceeds SPD guidance relating to outlook upon blank walls for properties to the east and west. In terms of privacy, the impact of the dwellings would be, again, similar to the established relationship between properties in the local area. It is noted that the window-to-window separation distances set out in the SPD are not met with North Friary House, which is located to the north of the site in particular. However, given that similar separation distances between old and new developments are present within the locality, officers do not consider that this would result in demonstrable harm. In addition, officers have recommended to remove the permitted development rights of the dwellings, including the provision of additional windows in the interests of maintaining neighbouring amenity. The Public Protection Service raised no in-principle concerns, and in line with their comments, the Council's Code of Construction Practice and reporting of any unexpected contamination have been secured via condition. Whilst concerns have been raised regarding the impact on the highway, the local highway authority have raised no in-principle objections with the proposed development, considering that the impacts associated with residential development would be neutral when compared to the established use of the site as a language school. The application includes the provision of 12 car parking spaces, 3 dual EV chargers, and 3 cycle spaces per dwelling, which meets the requirements set out in the SPD. Various conditions have been recommended by the local highway authority, which have been secured by officers. The proposal is not considered to have an unacceptable impact on protected species or trees, with mitigation in both respects secured via conditions. Officers note that a TPO beech tree was formerly located within the north of the site, which has been felled during the course of the application, but under a separate TPO consent. Mitigation planting secured as part of the TPO consent is proposed within the site and will be finalised via condition with the full landscaping details. Whilst the natural infrastructure team had requested further tree planting to mitigate the TPO tree's loss, officers considered that the mitigation complies with the TPO consent and is therefore acceptable. As outlined in the officer report, presently the natural infrastructure team also do not consider the submitted biodiversity net gain metric includes an accurate baseline of on-site habitats pre-development. Although it is regrettable that inaccuracies appear to be present, biodiversity net gain is a post-permission matter, and officers consider these can be rectified at condition discharge stage. 2 drainage options have also been brought forward as part of the proposal. The lead local flood authority have raised concerns that further information is required to understand which would be feasible. At this stage, officers understand that infiltration testing cannot be undertaken as there are existing buildings on the site, and so a drainage strategy cannot be finalised. As a result, officers have secured full drainage details via condition. Given that the proposal will result in the demolition and rebuild of the site, M5 of the Climate Emergency Planning Statement requires the overall carbon cost of the development to be offset within 25 years through operational carbon savings. During the application, officers requested the submission of embodied carbon calculations for the existing and proposed buildings in light of this requirement. Regrettably, this information was not submitted, and as such, the proposal does not comply with the requirements of the Climate Emergency Planning Statement. Officers consider that the existing building, however, is highly unlikely to be suitable for residential conversion, given its layout and challenges in improving its thermal efficiency. The proposed scheme would provide 6 purpose-built dwellings, which could provide better levels of occupant amenity and would be more thermally efficient than the existing building. Low carbon adaptation measures will also be delivered through the installation of EV chargers. As the local planning authority currently cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, officers considers that this carries weight in determining applications for housing. In this case, non-compliance with the Climate Emergency Planning Statement has been attributed a degree of harm. However, as the proposal would provide 6 dwellings in a sustainable area of the city, close to services and amenities, and allow for the redevelopment of a vacant site, any harm through non-compliance with the Climate Emergency Planning Statement is considered to be outweighed by the overall benefits of the proposed development. No further objections have been raised by any other consultees, with further information secured via condition regarding refuse storage and the provision of 2 accessible and adaptable homes in line with policy requirements. In conclusion, officers take an on-balance view in recommending the proposal for conditional approval. Just to note as well that I do have Chris Dawson from the Natural Infrastructure team here as well, should you have any particular questions for him. Thank you, Chair.
Emily, thank you very much indeed. Our first speaker on this, again, was Councillor Ricketts, who, the news hasn't changed, isn't with us, but I understand that he submitted a statement for you to read out for the committee. So if I could hand over to you again.
Chairs, members, thank you for listening to this statement, which has been jointly prepared by Councillor Ricketts and Councillor Holloway, who wanted to speak to you today but has not been able to. As members will be aware, it's unusual that we would issue a joint statement in this way, so I hope that conveys to you the strength of the feeling on this matter. There is an issue we have been working on together. It is not about party politics. It is about the best interests of residents in the surrounding area and whether this proposal is right for this site. We are speaking jointly as the ward councillors on behalf of residents to ask the committee to refuse this application. Charlotte was born just around the corner from this site. We know these lanes well. They are narrow, heavily used, and already under pressure. Parking is difficult, refuse is a problem, and access is tight. Residents have made it work through cooperation and compromise, but there is next to no slack left in the informal system. This proposal is for 6 3-storey houses on a very small backland site, relying entirely on already pressurised surrounding lanes for access, parking, refuse and deliveries. In our view, and in the view of the residents, this is clear overdevelopment. Resident Mary Stone has said that the site is too small for the number of houses and the layout suggested, and that the design is not in keeping with surrounding properties, most of which are only 2 storeys. While officers conclude the height is acceptable, residents experience the impact at ground level in very close quarters. Parking is the issue raised most consistently. Ms. Stone also highlighted that there are no allocated visitor parking spaces and warns this will lead to overspill parking, restricting access to garages, especially at night for personal safety reasons. Mr. and Mrs. Zab explain that parking is already so difficult that residents are sometimes having to park in another street, even Diamond Avenue. Although the plans show some spaces, they point out that this does not account for visitors, carers, deliveries or trades. In practice, those vehicles end up on surrounding streets and lanes. Officers have placed weight on the transport statement and on the fact that visitor parking is not required by policy, but members are entitled to take account of local conditions and cumulative impact. Nearby developments have already increased pressure, and residents are clear that the surrounding area cannot absorb more without harm. Waste and refuse are another long-standing problem. Mr. and Mrs. Zab describe numerous issues with refuse waste, bins positioned right next to the wall. In the summer months, the smell is awful. Harry Thurlaway Price describes surrounding lanes affected by fly tipping, parking, disorderly behaviour, traffic and overcrowding, and says that cars are now parked so badly that you cannot drive down it some days. While officers are confident refuse arrangements can be resolved by condition, residents' experience is that this is not working in similar situations nearby. We also want to refer briefly to the planning history of this site. We can only consider material planning issues today, but context is relevant. In our view, the main difference between this site and a previous refusal is not that the scheme itself is significantly better, but that the applicant evicted a much-loved charitable organisation from the building, thereby removing one of the earlier reasons for refusal. We do not think the planning system should be used in this way, or that it should reward that kind of behaviour, particularly where there are underlying impacts of the development still remain. Finally, we want to be clear about conditions. We do not have confidence that the conditions proposed will address the fundamental problems here. We cannot see how conditions can resolve what is, in reality, a clear case of overdevelopment in an area already facing severe day-to-day pressure. Relying on conditions in this situation is unrealistic. We asked for this application to come to committee because we believed these issues needed proper consideration. Having listened to residents and reviewed the reports, we believe the cumulative harm to parking, access, refuse arrangements, and local character has been severely underestimated. These lanes work currently, but residents have made them work. This proposal would put too much pressure on too little space. For those reasons and more, we ask the committee to refuse this application.
Emily, thank you very much indeed. Our second speaker is Mr. Robert Hurd. There we are. If you'd like to make your way down, you're welcome. Mr. Hurd, as you'll remember from my previous visit, you have 5 minutes. Would you like to be told when 4 have gone? Okay, whenever you're ready.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak in support of this planning application. You will be aware from the committee report that the existing building at the site is currently vacant, and it has been empty for almost a year now. As confirmed by the planning officer, despite a considerable marketing programme, interest in the site and building has been practically non-existent, with the only inquiries coming from developers seeking to demolish the existing structure and redevelop the site. This is unsurprising given the unique shape and layout of the existing building, which makes repurposing it almost impossible. Whilst the site represents previously developed land, which is identified in the NPPF as being the most appropriate for new residential development, an assessment of the relevant employment policies in the JLP has been undertaken. As confirmed by the planning officer in her committee report, following assessment of the marketing information submitted in support of the proposals, and on the basis that the former occupier is now operating elsewhere in the city, loss of the existing business would not be contrary to the relevant policies in the JLP, which seek to protect employment sites. With regards to the location, the site sits within a well-established residential area that is characterised by older housing stock that is mainly terraced. Many of the existing properties have been converted to smaller units, and the proposals will provide freehold family housing, which is one of the 3 identified most particular needs in the Plymouth policy area, within policy Dev 7 of the JLP. As explained clearly in the officer report, publication of the updated NPPF in December last year set out a new standard method to calculate local housing needs with the clear aim of increasing housing delivery nationally. The result of this is that there is now even more demand for all types of housing in Plymouth. As the city can no longer demonstrate a 5-year land supply, in determining the application, the LPA must apply the tilted balance in favour of sustainable development as set out in paragraph 11 of the MPPF. This is a significant material consideration which weighs in favour of the proposals. The layout, scale and design of the development is in keeping with the existing properties in the immediate area, and the Council's urban designer has stated support for the application, noting contemporary design and the use of high quality materials. Whilst it is noted that there are some letters of representation suggesting that the proposals will result in negative residential amenity impacts, a combination of the changes in topography, separation distances, orientation of the proposed dwellings, location of windows, and the type of property in the area ensure that the proposed development does not result in unacceptable amenity impacts being created. This is confirmed in the officer report, which states that the proposal is considered to comply with both Dev 1 and Dev 2 of the JLP. Members will note from the addendum report that there has been some confusion over whether there are trees present at the site due to the size and type of species of the existing shrubbery. However, the applicant is satisfied that this issue has been dealt with appropriately and agrees with the precautionary approach as set out in the addendum report, which requires additional tree planting to be provided as part of a comprehensive landscaping scheme at the site. The provision of housing in this location is deemed appropriate and acceptable given that the site is brownfield land, occupying a sustainable location. The proposals will benefit the area, providing effective use of an empty site, significantly enhancing the external appearance and visual amenity of the area, and providing much needed family housing which will make a valid contribution towards the existing shortfall. We ask that you support the officer recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hurd. If you'd like to make your way back, thank you. And it's now open to members of the committee. Patrick was first.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank the case officer, but also Mr. Hurd for their representations to the committee. I think we all know that sites of this sort of nature do need to be redeveloped, and it's obviously getting a balance. A number of representations have been received, and obviously a statement from the ward councillors would suggest, obviously today, in its current form, considerable issues exist in the neighbourhood. But I think we just need to remember that the usage today itself creates, did create up to a year ago, the generation of movements of people visiting the site to use the site for its current use. Whereas a residential use, one would consider to be a lot less movement because generally it would just be occupants of the house. And I'll come on to the bit about visitors, obviously to and fro from the respective houses. I think in relation to visitor parking, that may be something that when we review the joint local plan, members may wish to revisit that new development, particularly in confined locations, inner city sites, that perhaps visitor parking is considered, particularly given the fact that generally on lots of new modern redeveloped sites these days, the amount of road width for on-street parking is limited. So that probably from a lesson learned from the time we supported the last joint local plan is something probably members might want to revisit. I would take note, Chair, given the representations for ward members, there are a couple of conditions that I think would merit some ward member involvement. So condition 3, for instance, the construction management plan, which is quite a significant condition in relation to the implementation of any planning permission, perhaps should be in consultation with ward members and indeed chair and vice chair of this committee, and indeed condition 20, the normal code of practice that public protection apply to certain planning applications. Again, that would be useful for ward members in consultation with chair and vice chair to review such documents. Now, that's notwithstanding, obviously the committee need to consider whether or not this current planning application is supportable or not. But in the event that the committee does, I think it's important that ward members do have some involvement in those conditions, because actually on a constrained site, the method and manner in which redevelopment takes place can have a massive impact on the local community. And I think we should recognise as a committee that is an issue, and one that we want to do our best to control and take into account views of the representatives for the area. On the more substantive issue, you know, notwithstanding what ward members have said, these are challenging times for the provision of housing development. And listening to the representations made by Mr. Hurd, clearly there haven't been other proposals come forward for an alternative. So I think the principle of housing development on this site is one that I don't think we can object to. I think we ultimately have to support the fact that this site does need a future use. And given the fact that the area is predominantly housing development, I think it's supportable. So that's for starters, Chair, and happy to listen to other members.
Thanks, Patrick. Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Chair. So it's my belief that this site has been brought to planning before, and it's refused permission. And at that time, the use of the site was the language school, which was still in resident and was that a material decision for the planning? Was that the language school was in place at that site?
Yes, so in terms of the previously refused application, I think that was in 2022. So at that time, the language school was operating from the premises. I suppose now that the site is vacant, officers have kind of attributed a level of weight to that. But I suppose just in considering the application as a whole, you know, given that policy considerations have changed since then, in the fact that we do not have a 5-year housing land supply, officers have ultimately weighed up the application differently in this instance.
Thank you. So, I mean, as brought forward, as intimated by the statement by the councillors, if the owner of this site had evicted the previous tenants of the language school from this site in order to make sure that it was vacant for a future planning application, wouldn't that give rise to doubt around the fact that this site could be had effectively a commercial use under its current status?
I suppose ultimately we've assessed the application on the basis of the information that's been submitted. That includes a marketing report which sets out that there hasn't been interest in commercial use for the building. Taking that information into consideration and consulting with our economic development team, we've considered that in this case there's sufficient evidence to suggest that there's no feasible prospect of that use continuing. I suppose notwithstanding any kind of private matters which may have taken place regarding tenancy and things like that, but ultimately, in terms of the information that's been brought forward to us that we've taken into consideration, we haven't raised any concerns with the principle of the loss of the school.
So the circumstances regarding the previous occupants leaving wouldn't be a consideration for us, the situation around that. It's a vacant building. The method it became vacant, would that be a material consideration for us? There we are.
Oh, sorry. I would say that isn't a consideration for us. We are assessing the application on the information that's been submitted and is before us. The language school has vacated the site and they have relocated. So, you know, that is covered in the report. So we are assessing the application on the basis of the information submitted and the marketing information.
Thank you, Chair. I would consider the fact that there is the councillors have intimated that there was a previous tenant on the site that was evicted from that site unwillingly, suggests that there was a continued need for commercial activity on that site. If that's the case, then that would suggest that, you know, it's only because if the landlord had evicted those tenants and thus, you know, basically made the commercial activities of that site no longer tenable by evicting the previous tenants. If they had been continued to stay there, then this would be a commercially valid site because they would be paying rent, they would actually be commercially operating from this site. They have been evicted. If the councillors are right in their statement, have been evicted and moved on, then it sort of draws, you know, doubts over the commercial, you know, fact that this site.
Do we have any? I mean, I'm in fairness to everybody, including the applicants. Does anybody have any evidence of this? No. Yes. Do you?
Does anyone have any evidence to the contrary?
Well, either what's proposed is acceptable in planning terms, and that's what we're here to judge, or it's unacceptable in planning terms. We've had evidence, apparently, and as far as I know, none of the committee have sight of this, because that's how our system works, to show to our economic development team that marketing of the site has proved unfruitful so far. Do we know over what period that was? I mean, as a ballpark.
So from memory, I think the correspondence that we received said that they had instructed the estate agents in 2023 to market the site. And we've had further correspondence from them dated in 2025 stating that they had been unable to secure any tenant under a commercial use.
We're satisfied by the robust, for want of a better phrase, robustness of that report.
Yes, so the level of detail that was received, I suppose, would be comparable to what we have received for other applications of a similar scale and nature. Ultimately, as the economic development team reviewed that information and didn't raise any concerns, I'm minded to agree with their conclusions and consider that on the basis of the information submitted, there didn't appear to be a reasonable prospect of the use continuing.
Briefly, because you've had a good few goes now.
I know, Chair, but I'm I think this point needs reiterating, not just on a broader front, is that we don't get any details of this, and it holds open the possibility, and I'm not saying that this happened in this case, but it holds open the possibility that, you know, in order to redevelop a commercial site, you evict the current tenants, you market it at a sky-high rate of, you know, square footage for a period of 12 months, so that no one could possibly be interested in that site. And then you basically say, oh, we've marketed this site for 12 months, and now we need to, you know, redevelop it as housing. I mean, without...
Do we think? We're getting into legal areas, and whether we're getting into slander or libel, I'm not an expert.
No,
Jeremy, I'm speaking. Jeremy, I'm speaking, and we're in legal territory now. Mm-hmm. And forgive me, if you'd like to speak in the rest of the debate, I really do recommend you listen to what the chair is saying. The lawyer wants to come in.
Ultimately, the decision-making can only be made on the basis of facts and evidence. So the facts before you in the officer's report are something that you have to take into consideration rather than any statement that's unsubstantiated in a statement from the ward councillors.
Our job is to weigh up the evidence. So if one, I mean, the classic example is putting a factory on a field. If our green infrastructure officers say we can't stomach the loss of the field, that's a consideration. If our economic development officers say we need the employment and we need the jobs, clearly those are in conflict. Our job is to weigh up in our own individual judgments which is more important. What we're not here to do is introduce evidence of our own. That would be shot down. If this was to be refused, that would be shot down at appeal, and our constituents would have to foot the bill. So I would urge us to go on the facts that have been submitted and weigh up all the evidence. If we come to a different weighing up than the planning officer, that's absolutely fine, but it's not up to us to bring in hearsay and he said, she said from outside that can't be proved. No, I'm going to move on because you have had a good few goes on this. Patrick, I didn't see. Go on, Anne. No. But you've gallantly allowed Anne to come in there.
Patrick, you pushed me into it. In all seriousness, I'm struggling with this one. I have some concerns about the parking and vehicle access. I have some concerns over bin storage and where they're saying about bins will be put curbside on collection day. Where curbside on collection day? Are the refuse lorries going to be able to access the street okay? Concern over lack of visitor parking, and I'll give a perfect example of this because we all know how estates can work sometimes. I live on an estate where there's 101 properties. Each property has one allocated parking space, and we have 7 visitor spaces for the whole estate. Visitors can't park most of the time, so they then park on other streets, and so you have the outward ripple. And I could envisage this happening here. So I have some concern in that respect. At the same time, I'm also aware that yes, we do need the housing, but we need that amount of housing crammed into a more restricted area. And I know with the access lane going in and back out, it says about both lanes are cobbled single width carriageways where parking is prohibited between 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. What happens outside of those times? Life happens outside of those times. Is it going to impact on vehicle access in there? So these are my concerns that I'm struggling with.
Emily, can you help Anne with those issues, please?
So if I start on sort of parking and vehicle access, so the local highway authority have reviewed the application and they haven't raised any in principle objections. The level of parking that's proposed is 12 car parking spaces, which complies with the required parking allocation for developments of that size. So that complies with the SPD. As well as that, they haven't raised any concerns regarding access. Ultimately, the site previously has been used as a school and so would have had access and egress from both of those lanes as the site was served by its own parking. And so a transport assessment was submitted alongside.
Sorry, Emily, I don't mean to be rude at all. If I could just intervene on that. So where highways have looked at it, and because it was a language school previously, I presume the language school were operating on a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 basis where there wouldn't have been any parking in the access lanes. And of course, if it is turned into residential accommodation there, homes, outside of those hours, there's going to be issues that perhaps highways haven't looked at outside of the 9 to 5 weekends.
I'm assuming our highways colleagues have looked at what's proposed as opposed to what's been there both as a vacant site and a in-use commercial site. So the assessment they've made, I'm assuming, is based on what we've got in front of us.
Yes, that's correct. So yeah, a transport assessment was submitted alongside the application, which essentially concluded that the number of traffic movements would be generally the same as the existing use. It is appreciated that because those uses are different, residential and the language school, that might mean that those times of day may differ in terms of what times the lane is used. However, given that the site provides an ample amount of off-street parking, ultimately the local highway authority consider that it's an acceptable arrangement that has been brought forward as part of this application. If I go on to refuse storage next, so yes, at the moment, if I just flick back to the proposed site plan, it's very small, but you can maybe see in the bottom left-hand corner is where the bin store is currently proposed. At this stage, you know, we have conditioned further details on the refuse storage to ensure that that is going to be acceptable. Given the size of the site and the amount of bin storage that would be required, officers are satisfied that there will be an option within the site to include refuse storage. My understanding of the residential waste team's comments in terms of presenting the bins at the curbside, so I suppose that's something that we're going to have to look into as part of the conditioned discharge to understand how it can be ensured that the bin storage will be located on collection days in a location which won't impact on any of the access and egress arrangements. In terms of the lack of visitor parking, so the SPD and the JLP currently do not set out any requirements for new dwellings to provide visitor parking. And so whilst that has been raised in public comments, because we don't have a requirement for it, I'm minded that this wouldn't be a sufficient reason for refusal of the application. And then I think, was that everything, or was there anything else?
You always have to ask, Emily, I'm afraid.
I know I always cram a lot into what I ask, so thank you for that. That's helpful.
Thanks. Josh, I think I saw you indicate next.
Thank you, Chair. I think Patrick was actually next. He did have. Okay. I didn't want to jump the queue. Really interesting case. I guess for me, the first place I come from is a point of empathy. You know, one with the residents and the ward councillors. But we've heard, you know, there's not the issues with the SPD, with parking, marketing, and things like that. So they're, unfortunately, in this case, not our concern. I'd echo Patrick's point. I think it's really important that when we look at the JLP again, that we actually do start to take into consideration some of these emerging common threads, as they were, because they're things that the public care about and that we care about as individuals. So I think that's important. The massing, I think, in this instance, actually getting the height where there's a lot more height around, I think I'd support the urban designers with that. I think that's a real positive. The fact that we're talking about 6 family homes in proximity of a really gorgeous park, that's quite nice as well. I think that's something we should be aspiring to as a city. So I think that's a positive. The 25-degree line of sight, I was reassured by your comments on that. Parking, again, we're hearing that's not our concern, so at this point, yeah, I have empathy, but I don't think we can say any further. The trees, I guess, you know, we talk a lot about trees.
Can I just interrupt you? I totally get what you're saying. You've not said anything remotely inappropriate. It's just that when the phrase "it's not our concern," I think can sound a little bit dismissive. I think everything is our concern. It's what we can actually take into account.
Well, I'm just repeating, Chair, what we've been told.
Absolutely.
By the Chief Planning Officer and
I'm just worried
that isn't our concern here.
No, it's not our. I'm concerned about parking all over the city. I can't take it into account when I cast my vote on
this item.
Absolutely, yes.
So I guess that comes down to how the Herald reports this, isn't it? So if they want to make a big piece out of it, then I guess the legal standpoint is I'm talking about a single case, not the entirety of the city. And
I always look forward to Herald reports of our committees.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be something on it. Trees. I think, you know, we've got a natural infrastructure officer here. We've heard that this was a piece of concern. We've heard that there's been the loss of a tree ahead of demolition of the site. You know, are we optimistic and positive that this is all going to come through as it's being described with the conditions? You know, are we going to get that good outcome for nature? And is that something the natural infrastructure officer can talk to?
If I just come in first, so in terms of the replacement tree planting, it's been conditioned through the landscape ecological management plan, and so because that's a condition, in order for them to proceed above the damp-proof courseworks of the scheme, they would need to provide the full landscaping details, including details of the 4 replacement trees, their species, their location, and so as it's been written into a condition, they would need to provide that on site. I don't know if there was anything that, Chris, you wanted to add to that.
Thank you. Yeah. So, as Emily said, the mitigation is conditioned, so the development won't be able to proceed unless we are content that the mitigation is appropriate. I'd also flag that the site is subject to the mandatory biodiversity net gain obligation, so they will need to deliver a 10% uplift in biodiversity units as well as a result.
Thank you, that's really reassuring. I feel then with the facts that we have in front of us on the elements that are of our concern, I find myself in a situation where I can't do anything but support this, to be honest. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Josh. I'm going to come back to the conditions because Patrick at the start proposed, I think, and Patrick will stop me if I'm wrong, to conditions 3 and 20, that we open those out to include consultation with the ward, the 2 Drake Ward councillors, which might, if Angela will forgive me, I'm not sure that it's meriting chair and vice chair or shadow chair involvement. You're chomping at the bit, I can see.
No, I just think there should be some visibility for and discussion with ward members.
I'm happy to second it on that basis, and I can't see any great shaking of head. So we'll take those 2 conditions as amended on that basis. Any more on the? Yeah, go on then.
Oh, just a couple of well, three points.
So it goes from a couple to 3.
Well, 3. So basically, one's just to know, I always think it's disappointing there's no pre-application discussion, and I think this site probably would have merited the applicants discussing with the local authority the principles of development before, again, submitting a plan. So I'll just make that to note. Just on a specific point on parking, Emily, if you don't mind. So 2 spaces per property, is that normally there's a range? Is that the minimum or the maximum that can be provided for parking, please?
So in the SPD requirements, that's the minimum. So for a 3-bedroom house, the minimum parking provision would be 2 off-street spaces.
Fine, thank you. So when you look at the plan that you've got before us, we've got 6 spaces sort of at an angle and 2 that are effectively configured. And if they were all configured the same, and if the property that's slightly sort of in front of the other 2, or the other 4, have been pushed back, you might have got more parking. So was that ever considered? You know, you've generally got 2 in line, and then you've got 2 that are set in front. And yet, if they'd all been pushed and been in line, you would have effectively been able to provide more parking spaces.
Ultimately, because the local highway authority was satisfied with the level of parking, considering that it complied with the SPD standards, we didn't feel the need to negotiate to secure any further parking to that end.
Okay.
When something just, sorry to cut in, but just so everyone's understanding is clear, when there is a minimum that's been met, although there may have been, as Patrick was sort of alluding to, other possible designs that may or may not have produced more numbers, that's not a reason to oppose it, because this is acceptable in officer terms. There might be different permutations that give more, or there may not. We just, scientifically that hasn't been tested. You may be right, but that in itself doesn't make this unacceptable. Is that a fair summation?
Yes, that's right. So I suppose because we didn't have any concerns with the level of parking provision, we were satisfied to proceed on that basis. Our local highway authority, I suppose, would be unlikely to recommend that we refuse an application on the basis of it meeting the minimum parking instead of more than that.
Thanks, and I apologise for cutting you off. You were still in your mid-course there.
Yeah, no, fine, and accept the intervention, and it's absolutely correct. And the final point really is more a broader point for members. If members felt that the commercial activities on this site should be sustained in the future, members have every right to refuse the application for housing development and support commercial development. The only issue we have, which is a major issue, and it comes back to the statement you made at the beginning of the meeting, Chair, is that clearly without a 5-year housing and supply, our ability to defend ourselves in the current circumstances is very difficult. And anybody at any time could take a site that isn't housing, a multitude of alternative types of commercial and business activities that take place, and seek to turn that into a housing development. And on current national diktat, whilst it's not impossible, because there are circumstances that we can still oppose, but in general train now, we will find, and all councils in the country will find it difficult where we don't meet that test. And that's why I think we need, as a council, at the earliest opportunity, to try and meet the housing land supply figures, because if we don't, these sort of sites are far more difficult to battle on. So it's just a point I'll just make for observations, Chair.
No, and a very, very fair one, I think, as well. I think that's been a really useful. Oh, I'm so sorry, Kate. Of course.
Sorry, Chair. Just to clarify, so condition 20 is actually a compliance condition at the moment and doesn't require the submission of details. So is it members would like us to actually review a document and request conditions pre-commencement? Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, I thought it was the Public Protection Standard Code of Practice.
Yes.
Yeah, but we have, as a committee in the past, tweaked it to suit the circumstances of the local site.
Yeah.
So I would be seeking that standard document is consulted, the ward members are consulted upon it, because it's about delivery hours and hours of, and be content with what's agreed with the developer.
Okay. So yeah, we will amend it so that we are seeking details.
I think we've got the spirit of what's been agreed. Drafting and compiling things on the middle of a committee is never the best idea. I was hoping that we could move to a conclusion, but Anne is indicating just how small and brief her contribution is going to be there, so go on.
Teeny tiny, just in case I've missed it. Can we, and apologies if I have, can we ensure that local board, if this is approved, can we ensure that local board councillors and local residents will be consulted on working times of construction?
Yeah, that's certainly number 3, which is the construction traffic management plan. So that won't be approved until it's gone before. Assuming we vote for the application, that wouldn't be approved before the councillors have been able to have their say, the local councillors. So we are, because of the joys of the NPPF and the changes that were made late last year and now this year, there's something about December, isn't it? That's always the government's Christmas present to us, a change in the NPPF conditions. We do have to, and this is a change that we've seen over many, many years, put housing, the need for housing and to meet our housing land supply at the forefront of our decision making. And it's frustrating because we have all manner of other relevant planning issues, whether it's bin storage, whether it's design, whether it's height, whether it's massing, whether it's car parking, whatever, all relevant issues, but they don't get as much weight by far as the need for housing. And that's frustrating when we're elected councillors, either representing our wards or serving on the planning committee, but it's where we are. And the way Patrick's described it is, I think, pretty spot on. So, could this have been organised a little bit differently? Yes. Could there have been a little bit more consultation? Possibly. But we are where we are. We can only decide what's actually put in front of us. And I don't think the housing that's proposed is that bad. I think that the proximity to the park, as Josh reminded us, I think is a big plus factor for family homes. And we're going to have to get used to this new world of the NPPF, particularly the bits that were announced this week, which I spoke about quite briefly earlier on in the meeting. So, on balance, I'm okay with the recommendation, which is to grant conditionally. It's going to be nice to breathe a little bit of life back into the location and give some families some homes in a prime part of our city. So that's where I am. And if we could open the vote, I'd be grateful. Thank you. Okay, I'll take that as agreed. Thank you very much, everybody. Good debate. And we will go on to item number 7, page 41, which is the list of application decisions. Is there anything there anybody wants to raise? No, if not. Item number 8 are the appeal decisions, starting at page 57. And Kate, is there anything from your perspective, any big issues or concerns or threads that you want to bring to the committee's attention?
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else before we note these? We will do just that. I don't think we've got any exempt business, Elliot.
No, Chair.
No, it only remains for me to wish everybody a very happy Christmas and a peaceful New Year. It's been a really good calendar year. We're still only part way through the municipal year. That's the bad news. So you're stuck with this for a few months yet. But if certainly Kate and Elliot, to your relevant teams, if you could take back our thanks and good wishes for the holiday season, I'd be extremely grateful. I'm worried that's probably going to cost us about £4,000 just saying that. So, but you are right. And please don't think about the NPPF too much on Christmas Day when you're enjoying your turkey. But I will wish you compliments of the season and see you all very soon.